into the summertime again. We return to something we did last summer, which I call simply Psalm Like It Hot. It's getting hot. I'm still able to sit outdoors. Fortunately, in Cave Creek, we don't get quite so warm as other places do. But it's getting warm, and I wanted to come back to the Psalms. I'm just convinced the older I get that uh, it's just vital for Christian maturity for us to have a good appreciation for and understanding of the breadth of the Psalm. That in the typical evangelical culture that I've grown up in and which I pastor in and I swim in, we've sort of neglected these Psalms or used them simply with certain uh, texts we pull out and use for various purposes, but don't live and breathe the Psalms, because these have been a vital part of the worship of the people of God for 3,000 years. In the Jewish tradition, it was a regular part of their worship to read the Psalms. The Psalms are quoted within those 27 books of the New Testament, far more than any other book of the Old Testament. Isaiah, by the way, is second, and Genesis is third. And throughout church history, from the beginning until even today, devout people of God, so often in our lives, just being very unfamiliar with it. And so the devotional life of the believers is limited to whatever marketing device says to us, hey, this will make your life great. Read this, or study this, or this is the 40 days to get to there, and the 90 days to have you do this, and here's a video guide that you can study all of these things, which have their tools that are available to us, but not at the expense of the daily immersion in the Scriptures, and particularly being exposed to the Psalms. It's odd that many people, when they're going through difficult times in their lives, they will naturally go to the Psalms. They may not have read the Psalms regularly, but they looked for them. These are the words which express our opportunity to give our thanks, our praise, our complaint, our fears, our worries, our confession. All these things are found in the Psalms. And as you know, if you're part of our church family, we read a psalm every Sunday morning. We just take them consecutively through, never picking one against another, basically, but it happened for us. And so what I thought I'd do here at the beginning of this to have us share fourth psalm. As I say, it's not one of my favorites at all. It just happens to be the next one, and it's an honest psalm, which I simply call from dread to trust. From dread to trust. Listen to it, and I will share some thoughts about it. This is a psalm of David. It's addressed to the choir master. Hear my voice, O God, in my complaint. Preserve my life from dread. Hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the throng of evildoers, who whet their tongues like swords, who aim bitter words like arrows, shooting from ambush at the blameless, shooting at him suddenly and without fear. They hold fast to they talk of laying snares secretly, thinking, who can see them? They search out injustice, saying, we have accomplished a diligent search. For the inward mind and the heart of man are deep. But God shoots his arrow at them. They are wounded suddenly. They are brought to ruin with their own tongues turned against them. All who see them will wag their heads. Then all mankind fears. They tell what God has brought about, he has done. Let the righteous one rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him. Let the upright in heart exult. Here we see that David is sharing his concern with the Lord regarding some kind of situation, whether it's while he is a king and he has enemies spreading rumors about him, or whether he is a fugitive on the run, as he often was when Saul, for no reason that he had, when the king was chasing after him and trying to do away with him. Whatever the season of his life, perhaps as a young man watching over his sheep and thinking about his life, he has this psalm which expresses his trust in God in the midst of his joy. So let's take a look at this psalm. First of all, we appreciate its honesty. He turns his troubled thoughts into prayer. Hear my voice, O God, in my complaint. Preserve my life from dread of the enemy. He has troubled thoughts. His mind is troubled. He has worries on his mind. When he says complaint here, this doesn't mean that he's complaining ambush without shame, and they cover their tracks. They're scheming. Verse 2, hide me from the secret plots of the wicked, from the throngs of evildoers. He speaks how they weaponize their words, who whet their tongues like swords, who aim bitter words like arrows. Certainly, this is a whisper campaign of some sort against David. People are speaking about him. You know, in this day of social media, it troubles me. You've heard me say this before. It troubles me how Christians themselves will use social media in such derogatory and negative ways, in ways they would never speak to the face about someone. They will speak generally to the world, passing along information. It's little more than gossip. It shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be done. It's like swords. They aim bitter words. From the distance, they shoot from the hiding out in ambush, suddenly, without shame. They seek to cover their tracks. Verse 5, they hold fast to their evil purpose. They talk of laying snares, secretly thinking, who can see them? They search out injustice, saying, we have accomplished a diligent search. These are people who have evil motives, and they do everything they can to cover their tracks. And this last phrase is such a insightful statement about the human heart, not just others, but our own. I like this last part of verse 6. For the inward mind and heart of a man are deep. This is some pretty strong psychological surface of our lives. I've thought of this in my own life. I didn't see. When, of course, the fact that I'm having this very thought shows that I do see. I do know. But I'm lying even to myself. The inward thoughts, the inward mind and heart of a man are deep. Both my enemy in what he says, and even my own self in what I think. Now there's a sharp right turn as Psalm closes out, because having spoken the truth about others, as he perceives it, he speaks that he understands him. And I'd like you to notice, I don't want to take much time, I'd like you to notice the way that God turns their own weapons against them. How David, in his poetic fashion, takes some of the very words which he's already used to speak about those who are speaking against him, and says God will turn those words against them. Let me read the text. But God shoots his arrow at them. They are wounded suddenly. Notice the word arrows. It's in verse 3. They aim bitter words like arrows, but God shoots his arrow. And the word suddenly in verse 4. They shoot at him suddenly, and it says the Lord shoots at them suddenly. And in verse 8, they all are brought to ruin with their tongues turned against them. In verse 3 as well, who wet their tongues. So we have the poetic repetition of these words, arrows and tongue and suddenly. Those against me had arrows, but God has his arrow. Those against me are doing things suddenly, but God will do things even more suddenly. Those against me use their tongues, but God will ponder what he has done. David remembers that what God does our own understanding. And then he states finally his own choice to trust in the Lord. Remember, he first voiced his complaint against God, his honesty and his fear and his dread. But given having spoken the truth about his situation, their motives, their words, their secret plots, their underhanded nature, it turns on the right hand when he speaks the truth about God. But God will do what God will do suddenly with his arrow. The righteous one rejoice in the Lord and take refuge in him. Of sharing his complaint, speaking his truth,